Hello there friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Films. My name is Alan. Science fiction has always been my favorite genre for various reasons at various times in my life. When I was young, it was the visual effects and the amazing and fantastic worlds and possibilities that attracted me. I remember watching films like Empire Strikes Back, Terminator, Jurassic Park, and Short Circuit and being blown away by the spectacle of it all. In my more moody teenage years, dreaming of the day when school would be done and I could finally set out into the world, science fiction presented me the ultimate escape from the mundane realities of suburban life in the United States. I became obsessed with space films like Mission to Mars, Pitch Black, Titan AE, and of course, Knights of the Old Republic, one of my favorite games of all time. And now, as I get older and I have more stuff and responsibilities and more of an impact on the world around me, I'm attracted to science fiction once again because of its most important role in our society today, and that is to speculate on our future. Where will we one day go, and what challenges and opportunities our advances in science will create? Without science fiction, millions of kids would not be inspired to go into the sciences and technology. Without science fiction, millions more would not be focused on what potential impacts science and technology has on our future. A more educated and thinking populace most likely will lead to a healthier society, but that's only if the ideas being represented in sci-fi are also a fair and honest, accurate depiction of our own development cycle. Unfortunately, the science fiction genre, like all creative genres, are inundated with cheap imitations, businessmen posing as creatives, and other sorts of nonsense. Of course, there is great science fiction actually written by scientists like Carl Sagan, who wrote Contact, or Isaac Asimov, creator of the Foundation series and the 3 Laws of Robotics, and of course, David Brin, who wrote The Postman, which is widely hailed as the best post-apocalyptic story set in the United States, starring Kevin Costner. But most science fiction writers are professional writers who, at best, are hobbyists when it comes to the sciences and understanding the future trajectory of science and technology. Of course, this is easy to understand. It's why hard science is a lot less popular than franchises like Star Wars. Hard science, by the way, means science fiction that is grounded in science and not in fantastical things. I mean, I love Star Wars, guys. You all know that. I have an entire channel dedicated to Star Wars, but it has all sorts of nonsense, like the Force, hyperspace, and humanization of clearly non-sentient aliens who should be considered as food. Star Wars is great at inspiring kids to think about space and exploration, but it doesn't do a good job at forecasting the course of human technology. Although its lessons on geopolitics, democracy, and economics are priceless and very on point. But the point is, Star Wars is infinitely more accessible than Isaac Asimov's Foundation series. As Apple TV is now finding, it might be impossible to actually dilute this massive universe into a TV show. Not only because of the complexity of the galaxy and the ideas in Asimov's epic thought exercise, but because audiences demand more action-packed Star Wars like space battles and duels with laser swords. This is also why Starship Troopers went from being an extremely serious novel written by one of the grandfathers of hard science fiction, Robert A. Heinlein, into something completely different, but in a strange way, even more enjoyable. And so we come to this great conundrum. Many individuals in Western society has their views on science and technology heavily influenced by what they think is hard science fiction, but in reality is just Hollywood action films with dumbed down science fiction elements. This separation between reality and fiction is best seen in how the public views artificial intelligence. Americans have some of the most negative views on artificial intelligence in the world, according to this recent Pew Pew poll. Is this the result of American authors and writers creating the following unfriendly sci-fi AI, like the T-1000, HAL 9000, Ava, Cortana, Vicky, the Deus Ex Machina, the Cylons, Ash, and many others? Balancing those evil AI are just a handful of good AI, like the T-800, who had to be reprogrammed in the first place to be good, or maybe Bishop, whose predecessors and successors were a mixed bag of crazy and evil as well. Only Wall-E and Johnny Five exhibit pure goodness, and Chappie is South African, so that doesn't even count. So it seems like the American audience's opinion on artificial intelligence is heavily influenced by the sci-fi genre. Of course, there are other factors that come into play like age, education level, and gender, but there definitely seems to be a correlation. Now, what we really need is a control group to compare this with. And of course, no one loves controlling their populace more than the Chinese Communist Party. In the Chinese mainland, or as I like to call it, Western Taiwan, because it pisses off stupid hyper-nationalists, only a few foreign films are allowed into the country each year. Now, this number has risen in recent years, but the wide range of restrictions on what is allowed are still just as confusing and random. But the general rule used to be that science fiction degraded the spirituality of a communist society, or blah, 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 blah. They also banned other things like Winnie the Pooh because he kind of looks like President Xi, and time travel Because I suppose the Communist Party wouldn't want someone to go back in time and stop, say, the Cultural Revolution, which is widely hailed by the populace secretly as one of the most self-destructive moments in Chinese history. The point is, sci-fi, until recent times, was very unlikely to make it to the mainstream audiences in China, and it didn't matter if it was a domestic or international film. Although, as a child in the 90s, I remember visiting my grandmother's house in Shanghai, and she had a huge collection of VCDs and tapes of like all sorts of sci-fi films. I mean, how do you think I saw Empire Strikes Back and Jurassic Park for the first time? But for the most part, in the last few decades, the majority of Chinese audiences consume science fiction as much as Americans consume the humility pill about our stance in the world. It should be more, guys. And therefore, Chinese society is highly optimistic about the future of AI. China also happens to be leading the world in AI research and the implementation of AI in controlling society. It's actually terrifying. I mean, right now in Xinjiang, you literally have cameras on every street corner and doorway using advanced facial recognition algorithms, unfortunately developed by American companies and scientists to track their movements. Xinjiang is very much the testing ground for the future of China's surveillance program. And unfortunately, large swaths of the Chinese population seem to be okay with that and have bought into the government narrative that it will make everyone safer and more obedient to law and order. There's also the social credit score that they will roll out, which will automatically dock points from individuals for mundane things like jaywalking or having too much debt. Individuals with lower social scores will have less access to services and less financial opportunities. The question is, do Chinese people support this program because they're too afraid to say otherwise? Or is it because pivotal science fiction like 1984 and Minority Report never reached their shores? I feel like it's a bit of both. On the flip side, here in America, we actually are doing quite well on the AI front. We have more high-level talent and researchers working on implementing AI solutions than anywhere in the world. There's also been a move recently to bring back chip manufacturing infrastructure to the United States. Taiwan Semiconductor, the leading producer of silicon chips, and Intel will hopefully be building massive foundries in Arizona, which will provide the hardware that will open up our tech tree to the most powerful AI solutions in the future. But as Americans, we also have to improve our understanding of what AI is and what it isn't. If we spent half the time we did speculating on cryptocurrency pyramid schemes that we did on learning what AI was, we'd be in a much better position in the world. Now, in the Western world, we are terrified of artificial intelligence, and I am equally as guilty of perpetuating that kind of mentality. I admit I routinely tell our audiences to attack and destroy their smart home appliances. But the reality is AI is already here and heavily involved in everything we do. And AI most likely brought you to this very page and to this video. Another algorithm probably gave you some very specific game day stats, like how Tom Brady has a 30% chance of dying on the field before retiring. The censorship that a lot of YouTubers complain about on this platform is also another algorithm. It's a classic trick. YouTubers claim that YouTube is evil and coming after them and ask you to donate money to their Patreon, when in reality, it's most likely the algorithm is just incompetent and not doing a very good job at filtering out things. Of course, manual censorship is bad, but Facebook and YouTube are cheap. They'll never be able to afford all of those censors to look over every piece of content on their platform. It just wouldn't make sense as a business model. The point is, AI can be a force for good or a force for evil at this point in its development. This idea that it will become sentient and take over the world is actually very far in the future and is speculative science at best. Anyone who gives you an exact timeline on how this will happen is probably full of crap. Individuals like Elon Musk who say they are afraid of AI are more afraid of the evil uses of AI like we see in China, more than AI becoming self-aware and taking over society. And so we as a human race need to be actively involved in this discussion about AI technology. We can't just let a handful of scientists and government officials dictate the course of this important technology's future. Because AI can actually be the equalizer that America needs to take back control of the supremacy of the world. As imperfect as this country is, its relatively free markets, relatively free press and society, and democratic values are a much better alternative to whatever nonsense Winnie the Pooh is peddling over there. And in order to compete with China's 4-to-1 population advantage, we'll need all the help we can get from AI algorithms. We have to be forward-thinking in how automation can improve the lives of the average American, how it can generate more wealth, and at the same time figure out a way to take care of all those individuals who will lose their jobs because of automation, and help them find a new, more rewarding use of their valuable time. I mean, a democracy fails without educated voters. Imagine if we all had more time to follow up on what was going on in the country rather than being slave workers in an Amazon factory. We deserve better. We deserve more. We should all fight for our future by being more rational and aware of what's going on around us.